Welcome to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25 Media. We feature top founders, executives, and business leaders from all over the world.
Hello, listeners. Bela Musits here, host for this podcast, where we feature top restaurateurs, investors, and business leaders. This is part of our SpotOn Series. SpotOn has the best-in-class payment platform for retail, and they have a flagship solution called SpotOn Restaurant, where they combine marketing, software, and payments all in one. They have served everyone from large chains like Dairy Queen and Subway to small mom-and-pop restaurants. To learn more, go to spoton.com. That's SPOTON.com. Hey, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. We help B2B businesses get return on investment, clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships through custom done-for-you podcast. If you have a B2B business and want to build great relationships with clients, referral partners, and thought leaders in your space, there's no better way to do it than through podcast and content marketing. To learn more, go to rise25media.com. That's RISE, numeral 2, numeral 5, media.com. Or email us at support@rise25media.com. Today's guest is Scott Slaymaker. Scott and his brother Eric run Wingers Restaurants. Wingers was started with the best wings recipe in the world and now has expanded to include salads, burgers, tacos, and Winger Brothers beer, which has resulted in consistent growth and expansion of the Wingers brand. Scott has worked in the hospitality business for over 40 years, developing and operating numerous brands. He has seen tremendous change in the evolution of the restaurant business. Welcome to the podcast, Scott.
Bela, thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, you're very, very nice. Nice for you to take the time to be here with us today. So let me ask you a question. What was the inspiration for starting Wingers?
Oh, wow. That goes back a little bit. But prior to that, I'm trying to make a long story short, but Eric and my father had been in the estate planning business, but always wanted to be, was a frustrated restaurateur, wanted to be in the restaurant business. Eventually developed a number of restaurant brands, was a Sizzler franchisee in Alaska, Chi-Chi's franchisee in Utah and Idaho, as well as a couple of others, TGI Fridays. And that's really how I got involved in the business, because Eric and my father was a tremendous entrepreneur, but as I like to say, couldn't manage his way out of a paper bag in a restaurant. So he sort of nabbed me out of college and we got involved in that. So getting back to Wingers, Wingers was the idea of taking everything that we had known and providing it in a more of a tertiary market, a B market. So your Fridays, your Applebee's, your Chili's, these legacy brands, they wouldn't go into because it's simply the size they couldn't make the unit economics work for them. So our idea was to take a lot of what we had learned from that and put that together in some of these smaller markets. So that's how it happened. Our first one was in Bountiful, Utah, which is a suburb, if you will, of Salt Lake City. I know the Bountiful people would probably get mad to hear me say that, but it's just outside of Salt Lake City. But that was really sort of the genesis, I guess you might say, of Wingers.
Yeah, excellent. So you kind of carved out your own geographic niche from a demographic perspective. Yeah,
correct. Our attitude was we didn't want to go on the big regional malls and compete head to head with these guys. It didn't make sense, but we did feel like there was an opportunity in some of the smaller neighborhood markets to go in and make a mark. And I think it's fair to say that it's been relatively successful for us.
Yeah, excellent. So what were those early days like?
Oh, wow. Well, it's interesting. Let me tell you that. Wingers, and today, actually, the full name is Wingers Restaurant and Alehouse, but that is a far stretch from where Wingers was when we started. Wingers, actually, the first one Our brother-in-law had this great recipe for a sauce. We played with the wings. We ended up bringing in a Pullman train car, put it on a piece of property in Salt Lake City. It was really sort of a beta test, I guess you might say. It was not full service. The Wingers is full service casual dining today. It would be what you would consider fast casual at the time, where you had a counter. And actually started it as calling it California C&R. California, because that's where our brother-in-law, who at the time had partnered with us, had come from. C&R stood for chicken and ribs, and we had some great chicken and ribs. And that was really what started with it. The lease we had, again, with the developer, he had told us we had a year-to-year lease because he had eventual plans for developing. So when we finally, after, I don't know what it was, 5 or 6 years, got the word that we had to vacate, we thought we had something. We liked what it was doing. And so the first actual Wingers was established in Bountiful, Utah. So that's a long story to get us to where we started.
Yeah, well, that's a great story. And so what year was the first Wingers started? The
first actual Wingers opened in Bountiful, Utah in September of 1993.
Got it. So when you were starting this original pre-Wingers restaurant that was sort of in a Pullman car, how did you know that you had the right recipe, if you will, to actually, take this and turn it into Wingers? What were the metrics that told you, hey, we got something here?
I'd like to say that we had all sorts of data and everything else, but at the end of the day, what it was people just loved it. We were fairly adjacent to downtown Salt Lake City. We had all kinds of Utah Jazz NBA players that would come in and buy wings. Shaquille O'Neal came in and bought wings. In fact, it was fun because in the old Pullman car, they'd sign their names up on the walls and stuff, that sort of stuff. So that's kind of where we got the idea that, this is resonating somewhere. People are liking that. We would have a number of NBA players when they would visit Salt Lake to play the Utah Jazz would come to Wingers. And again, I don't want to represent that it was this, beautiful. This was an old Pullman train car, for heck's sake, that we stuck a counter and a kitchen in and a couple tables. Yeah. So it very humble beginnings, let's say that.
Well, it sounds like it had a lot of character.
It had character. There's no question about that. Yes, sir.
Right. So over the years, you've expanded the menu. So how do you know when it's time to add menu items?
Wow, that's such a great question. And, it reminds me, I was a panelist at a recent conference in Nashville, Tennessee, and somebody brought up the statement that I wrote it down and I still use it, is the restaurant business is simple is hard. And I love that because it speaks in my mind to certain menu disciplines. And coming from a background of I think I said TGI Fridays, Chi-Chi's, Sizzler prior to that, Tony Roma's. We had 16 Tony Roma's at a time. One of the biggest challenges we always had, particularly with, for example, TGI Fridays, whose menu was voluminous, is what sort of menu discipline do you have? Because the more items you have on the menu, the more convoluted things can get, the more inventory you carry, the more prep there is. Everything just kind of builds on that. So we did know that when we lost our lease on the California C&R and we had decided that we wanted to be in the casual dining and do a full service experience, that we weren't going to be able to do that just with wings and ribs that were basically packaged for takeout. So that's when it started. But again, it was very simple. It was a placemat menu that sat in front of you, and we probably had 20 items. We expanded doing some burgers, a couple of very simple salads and whatnot. And, over the years, that has expanded. And in fact, particularly since the pandemic and that, it has contracted quite a bit as well due to supply chain issues and simply just trying to simplify, what we do because of the lack of staffing that everybody's dealing with and continues to deal with.
Right. So how do you sort of test a new menu item?
That's actually a great question. The first thing that we do is we have our director of operations, Patrick Diesner, is a certified chef. And so one of the things that we really like to do is to think in terms of a somewhat of a chef-driven menu that is very simple to produce, because as you know, the more you proliferate in numbers, the bigger challenge it is in maintaining that consistency, which was just so important. But the first thing we do is we actually test it in one or two of our restaurants. We may test it in a market. For example, we have one restaurant in Pocatello, Idaho, that is relatively isolated, if you will. So we're able to put something on the menu there and sort of track and see what happens, see what kind of menu share we can get, see what happens when you market it versus not marketing it. But that's typically the way we like to do it. But then, getting back to menu discipline and the simplicity, one of the questions we asked ourselves in the leadership team meeting then is, if this is going to make it to the menu, what are we going to take off the menu, and
Right.
trying to keep that? And that's where one of the biggest challenges, not just us, but I think any restaurateur has, because everybody wants to please their guest. And, you have one guest that comes in and said, you ought to have a spaghetti sandwich or something like that. And the first, the gut reaction is, oh my gosh, we got to rush to do this sort of thing. We really like to try to be data driven and prove that actually it sells, while at the same time being believable for the brand.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. So you have multiple locations. How do you sort of ensure consistency, both on the front end of the house and the back end of the house, so that you have a consistent experience for your customers?
Well, that's the age-old question, and some people do it a lot better than others. We work very hard at that. I would love to say we're perfect. We're not. I was just in one of our franchise locations in northern Utah yesterday and noted a couple things that this isn't exactly the way the plate's supposed to be set up, or some things like that. That's the biggest challenge. But one of the things that we do is we have invested a lot of time and energy into communication. We have an entire training program. We have, we call them build cards. So anytime a new menu comes out, we have a build card that has basically a sensitivity guide that says, these are the things that go on it. This is what it looks like. There are photos of it right there. So from a back of the house standpoint, that is what's expected. And in fact, when we do reviews, I know I do reviews in restaurants. We have them make quite a bit of the food, and I have the build card sitting right there when they bring that out to the table and say, okay, now let's look at this and see how this compares to what it's supposed to. And it's interesting how creative some of our team members like to be sometimes. So let's just leave it at that. Having been said, the same thing goes to the overall experience. I mean, one of our mission statement of Wingers is creating amazing experiences. The experience is not just food. Clearly, it's food driven, but what is that experience from the service standpoint? What does it look like the first time you drive up to the restaurant? You walk in. What is your greeting? So we actually have what we call a QA, and it has all of those things listed. We have an entire training program. Steve Burchard, who was our director of guest experience, he's got a training a program all against those things that works toward that, actually with hands-on activities. And we invest a lot and we commit a lot to training and making sure that we're just doing it over and over again, understanding that at least from our perspective, we've never hit perfect. But, that is the goal, with the understanding that we probably never will be absolutely perfect. There's the human element in that, and that's what we try to work with.
Yeah, excellent. So let me ask you another question. You mentioned that sometimes you have creative people, who like to put their own touches on various different things. Do you have a system for sort of capturing some of those? Because some of those may be great suggestions and improvements. Right?
That's a tremendous question, and I say that because if you look back in history, some of the greatest, the biggest selling items now, for example, the McDonald's filet of fish was come up by a franchisee, with
right.
that. So, that may be I don't mean to blatant advertise for McDonald's, but, doggone it, when you talk about consistency, that's one thing that they get right, for it.
Yes.
So we actually do that as part of our QA. And again, I can go into a restaurant and I've got the whole thing on an app right on my phone here. Part of that is we actually will take photos of these things. It's all stored in the cloud. Our director of guest experience, Steve Burchard, will go through, we'll look at discrepancies. And, some of those discrepancies may be a plate presentation, or we've had other franchise partners as well as managers in our own restaurant that say, hey, this would be a great way either to do this or, some brand new thing. And then again, we have a form, if you will, that, okay, what is the recipe? What are the portions? What does it cost out? Can you sell it for a price where you're going to get a suitable return to net, but still provide a value for your guest? And then we're kind of going backwards. But then if we decide that we can make all those things happen, then it goes to the test that we were just talking about. So let's test that in a restaurant and just see what the guest result. It's interesting, and I'm guilty of this as well. We have so many managers, and I go back 44 years now, that say, we have got to do this because my guests are just screaming for it. And then you say, okay, so what exactly and who is it? Well, it's this guy that comes in once a month that wants to do the, but again, that's the human condition. Somebody tells us we need to do something. We are so conditioned in the hospitality industry to want to please that all of a sudden there is this great demand for something that may or may not actually be there. And that's why, again, we really try to be as data driven as we possibly can be.
Yeah. Yeah. So, some of your stores are franchise and other ones are company owned. Did I get that right?
That is correct. That is correct. We as a company operate 9 company restaurants. There are 23 total restaurants in 5 states. We're in Utah, Idaho, Nevada. What did I miss? Oregon, pardon me, with that. We actually are moving into the Midwest right now. We just signed a multi-store development agreement for Oklahoma City, and we're working with some other potential franchise partners in the Midwest. That's kind of our focus moving there, as well as some of our current franchise partners are looking at developing their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th restaurants as well.
Sure. So what do you look for in a franchisee candidate?
Boy, Bela, how much time have you got, for heaven's sakes? Because I can tell you this, one of the biggest mistakes, and I'll admit, anybody that's been in this business and said they've never made mistakes is just flat out lying to you. But, one of the challenges that we had in Wingers, we were much bigger at one time. We had over 30 restaurants. But one of the things that we found was we were so eager to franchise that we would award a franchise. Hey, if somebody's got $40,000 and we think they can build a restaurant, hey, let's do it. Bing, we got another franchisee. We actually, over the past 5 or 6 years, have realized that we actually had to get a little bit smaller before we could position ourselves for growth again, because some of our franchise partners, as much as they were great people, just weren't cut out to be a great operator. And so that's one of the first things is we've had a number of people that have come to us that say, listen, I've got the money to do this. I want to do it. And the first question is, tell me what your operations team is going to look like, because if you cannot deliver on the promise we're making to the guest, we're all wasting our time here.
Right.
Secondly, the other thing that is very important to us, we happen to use Cisco as our primary supplier. Other people use FSA or, whatever that may be. Yeah. But one of the things we have found is we have certain proprietary items that if we can't be within the footprint of a Cisco, it makes it very difficult to get those proprietary items to, for example, our original amazing sauce, which we ship that stuff all over the world. We've shipped that to Saudi Arabia. It is addictive. I can't lie to you, and it works on just about everything, with the exception of pancakes, French toast, and waffles. That's probably not a good idea there. But so we look for an operations team or operational ability. We look for the ability for product distribution, and then something that really has just really gained our attention over the past 8 to 10 years is, what is the human capital like in the markets with that? Because if you cannot hire and retain great people, you're going to really struggle as far as operating. I don't care what restaurant it is. And, we're all being challenged by that right now.
Right, right. So as you guys have evolved, earlier we talked about, you looked at sort of second tier markets, so you're not competing against other sort of bigger chains. Has your location criteria evolved over time?
It really has, Bela. And the simple reason is, we thought that, for example, we could go into Laramie, Wyoming, and we'd never be touched by anybody else. Well, 5 years later, here's Applebee's building one right down the street, and then Chili's is there now, and all of the other things. So, one of the things that became clear to us pretty quickly is we have got to take care of what we do within our own four walls. The competition is going to be there regardless of who it is, and frankly, in most cases, regardless of where it is for that. So yes, we've gone into some larger markets now. Still probably aren't going to take the corner pad side out on a major mall or something like that, but we are competing in those major markets, but just more neighborhood locations.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. So when you walk into a restaurant, immediately as a customer, you get a feel. You get a feel for how you're greeted, the way people treat you, the way they react to you, sort of the culture of the place. How do you sort of think about culture, and how do you sort of instill that into both the company-owned restaurants and the franchisees? You read my mind on that. We stress culture and leadership every single day. I was just in Pocatello sitting down with our general manager there, who's a wonderful young lady, who's been with us for quite some time now. And that's what we talk about, is how do we continue to develop our leadership? How do we continue to develop our culture? Because there's something very interesting in that. I've got a dear, dear friend. He's a college fraternity brother, and he's a brilliant consultant in leadership development. I rarely see him. He travels the world working with large companies. He's worked with Disney, Toyota, things like that. But I remember on a fishing trip in Canada once, we were sitting on the side of the river because we were about 5 days after the steelhead had moved out. So we had nothing to do other than sit and talk. And he made a profound comment to me once, and it said, if you are not actively involved in developing your culture, a culture will still develop. It just may not be the one that you want. And so, and it's hard to change.
Once you get that, it is hard to change. So that's something that we see the same thing even within our relatively small brand, is one store outperforms another one. And we keep saying, why is that? Why is it, as you say, you can walk in and there's just a vibe that, this is going to be a good experience, where you go in the other one and it's like, something's not quite feeling right. It all comes down to leadership and culture for it. So we focus a great deal on that. We're even focusing more. That's really where the past couple of years, have spent almost all of my time, is in leadership development, because we can show you data where a restaurant that has had a longer term consistent leader continually outperforms the other restaurants from a unit economic standpoint, whether it be sales, food cost, anything else. It's all about leadership and culture.
Yeah. So when you have that situation where one restaurant, has great leadership and it is outperforming, how do you sort of peel back that onion and figure out what those secret ingredients are so you can replicate that in your other locations?
That is such a great question. And I think it's got to go back. This is actually a conversation we were just having in our leadership team meeting here a couple of weeks ago. And, one of the things that it comes back to is you've got to hire the right people. And particularly in today's world, where staffing is such a challenge, and it's not just hourly staff, it's management, and quite candidly, the hospitality industry's kind of gotten a little bit of a bad rap by a lot of people saying, well, they don't pay anything, there are no opportunities, it's slave labor. I would argue that, because I'll tell you, we've had some people that have been very successful, working with us as operating partners and whatnot. But that be nevertheless, it really comes back to getting the right people in the right place. And we call it putting aces in their places for it. And you've got to hire the right person. We have made the mistake time and time and time again, where out of a sense of urgency to fill a position, it's like, are they walking? Are they upright? Yeah, okay, great. And and there's a funny thing, and it's not just in the restaurant business. It's in I just think it's in life. All of a sudden, we bring somebody in, we give them a couple weeks training, we give them the title of manager or general manager, and by some great process of osmosis or something, now we think that they know everything, and we can just leave them there, and they're going to do their thing. And we are learning. We continue to learn that every time we make that mistake, we're going to be back reworking and we're readdressing the same mistake again. And I'm not blaming the people all the time. I'm blaming the leadership team from assuming. I mean, it starts right here. And yet, after 40 years, I find myself occasionally still making the same mistake.
Yeah. Hey, Scott, I want to start wrapping this up. We've been at it for 25 plus minutes. Is there something that I've not asked you that you would like to share with the audience?
You know, I think more than anything else, my father, who's been gone for 27 years, and I told you about him, was an incredible entrepreneur. Never could manage a restaurant, never understood it, never wanted to understand it. He was a little bit ADHD in that respect, but he always had a statement, and it comes back to people. And I remember he used to always tell me, all the brick and mortar in the world does you no good unless you have the right people that are operating that. And I have found that in, what have I worked with, 5 or 6 different concepts now, whether it be Tony Roma's, TGI Fridays, Chi-Chi's, Sizzler. It's about the people. The hospitality industry is about the people. And there are some tremendous opportunities in the hospitality industry, whether it be a career or whether it be a stepping stone. And the organizations that recognize that and foster and work with those people are the ones that are going to be the most successful, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Well said, Scott. So if listeners want to find out more about Wingers or get in contact with you, where's the best place for them to do that? Best
place, we have a website, www.wingerbros.com. My brother Eric and I have somehow become the Winger Bros over the years. I'm not sure how that is, but wingerbros.com. Or you can email me directly at Scott, SCOTT, at wingerbros.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Hey, Scott, thank you for being a wonderful guest on the podcast. You were really good. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Pleasure is all mine, Bela. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25. Visit rise25.com to check out more episodes of the show and to learn more about how you can start your own podcast.